Hello everyone, my name is Sarafi and I'm happy to meet you all. And today we are going to be um, kind of doing like, not a response, but a homage to Distant Coder's video that just came out yesterday. Distant Coder, an excellent Master Duel content creator, and he said that, you know, Master Duel could become a much better game if they just released a massive ban list where they just take a bunch of cards that are too prevalent or too unfair and simply ban them. And he made a ban list with like 48 cards and just took them all out and said the game would be better if all these were gone. He gave his reasons, and I thought it was pretty interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and do something similar. So here is my idea for how Master Duel could be improved dramatically, keeping in mind that the existing OCG and TCG ban lists are based on a best-of-3 format. Ban lists, even though they affect everyone, even though they affect things like they affect Master Duel, Duel Links, even though those decks are different formats, like when you have a card that's banned, it impacts perception, it impacts how quickly it gets nerfed, that sort of thing. You know, there's an expectation that a banned card will be powerful, and a lot of them are. With that in mind, if you are playing a best of one, it's a lot different than if you're playing a best of three. With best of one games, you have to play a lot of hand traps to make sure that even if you go first, like even if you go first and you brick a lot, it's better to have hand traps so that you can do something when you go second. And this is part of the reason why decks like Speedroids are not very good in Master Duel, because you have to, if you can't load your deck up with a bunch of hand traps, which Speedroids can't, then you are going to suffer a lot when you are forced to go second, because you can't just demand going first afterwards. And in the same way, there are other decks that are just like, oh, well, I'm being forced to go first because my opponent is playing Tenpai or something, and my deck is built for a blind second. With that in mind, I want to go ahead and I want to kind of address what I think should be removed from the game to make the game more consistent and more interactive. What Coder said was, you want 80 to 90% of your games to feel like they're an actual game. And right now, it's more like 10 to 20% of your games feel like an actual game. And what he means by that is a situation where you go back and forth with your opponent, and the reason that one of you loses is because of a misplay or better management of resources. Right now, his claim, and I don't necessarily think it's to the degree that he's saying, but I do think that he has a point. Right now, the main reason why people lose is because my key card got ashed, or I got hit by Droll on this card, so now I can't search, or I had the perfect out, but my opponent called by the grave dits, that sort of thing. And people make that sort of distinction all the time. Like there's a meme about like the Maxx C minigame. The opponent Maxx C's you. Do you have Call by the Grave? Do you have Ash Blossom? That sort of thing. So let's discuss. Okay, so I don't know how many cards I'm going to say, but it is going to be over 20. So just keep in mind that these cards are all getting banned 100%. So. First of all, I think that Maxx C should absolutely be banned. I have defended Maxx C in the past, mostly because I think that complaining about a card that is indefinitely not going away is pointless. So I try and keep a positive spin on things. I tell people, this is the benefit of Maxx C. which the benefit of Maxx C is that it punishes combo decks for extending too far and building a board that's just too perfect. Because if you are dealing with your opponent setting up 8 cards, and 4 of them have negates, and you only have 6 cards in your hand, you're not going to be able to win that game. And you can play other hand traps, like you potentially play Ash or maybe Ghost Ogre or some other cards that try and stop a board from being built. But the best decks have been designed to play through Ash. They have cards that set directly from the deck, or they have abilities where they're not affected, like Tenpai. So, or gimmick puppets. So, with that in mind, the best decks are not impacted by Ash or Effect Veiler nearly as badly, which is why they are so good. That's why the best decks are the best decks. They can play through the non-Maxx C hand traps really easily. So Maxx C exists to give players who face these decks a fighting chance. But still, the card is disgusting. It makes it so that you really feel like the game is hopeless. And the worst part is, even if you decide, okay, I'm just going to build like a somewhat mediocre board and then pass, it's most likely, if it gets chained to a card that you trigger to summon off of, that you'll probably summon again, because you normal summon, special summon a tuner monster, and then synchro summon, right? So in that instance, your board is mediocre. Your board is probably not that good, and your opponent still drew 2 cards. So your opponent has more resources than you did, and of course they have more resources than you do anyway because they're going second. And now you have to concede the turn because you are worried that your opponent is going to end up with like 20 cards in their hand. So Maxx C is just a card that's it creates a sense of hopelessness. And whether that is good for the game or bad for the game, it is not good for the players. So I do think that card should be banned entirely. Oh, I'm not going to go to nearly as much depth with the other cards because the list would take forever. But I wanted to make it clear what I think the problem with Maxx C is. All right. With that in mind, with Maxx C out of the way, we also want to get rid of Droll. Droll and Lockbird is... Droll Lockbird is a fantastic card and can be played in a lot of decks, especially decks like Speedroids where you can't run too many hand traps. Droll is a good way to make sure that if you do open one of your hand traps or you search it, that you have a fighting chance. Droll and... This is important to note. Droll and a lot of other hand traps that have 0 attack points make excellent bridge cards for Small World, which is part of their interest, but it's just too much. This card is a card where if you can't draw, then your turn is over a lot of the time, and that creates a non-game scenario, like what we were talking about before. So I do think that going first is very powerful, and I do think that Droll and Lockbird is a big reason why going first is not going to guarantee a win. But and the problem with that is if you can't play Droll, it's not like you can just play a bunch of board breakers. And this is the important thing to note about a best of 1 format. You ban Droll and Lockbird, and then you just say, well, you can run a bunch of board breakers to try and stop your opponent from building a board. Like Maxx C's gone, Droll and Lockbird is gone, so you can play Raigeki, you can play Lightning Storm. Those cards are just completely dead when you go first. And that creates a sense of, is going first going to be too good? There are a lot of hand traps in the game. You can play Imperm, you can play Effect Failure, you can play Ash, you can play Ghost Ogre. I'm not going to ban any of those. But it does feel like those cards are going to be inefficient, and they will make certain decks basically unstoppable. This ban list really would tackle the kind of the problems with Master Duel as a format. And then once that ban list has been implemented, you would probably need to go through and ban specific cards for specific decks to tamper their power with the new format. And I understand that, and I'm acknowledging that, but I don't know exactly how the meta would look after this gets done. So that would have to be like a separate action that's taken after you see how the dust clears. Next up, the big one is Appollousa. So, Appollousa, Bow the Goddess, currently banned in the TCG. The big problem with Appollousa is that the card is, yes, it takes 4 cards to make, or 2 cards, or 3 cards, but the problem with Appollousa is that she represents on her own removing multiple cards from your opponent's hand. And that is just a very difficult situation to be in. So like if you have to play like a card like how can I explain this? A singular negate like Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon is essentially a 1-for-1 interaction. Even though the Crystal Wing is not destroyed, so it's not really like a full 1-for-1, the Crystal Wing no longer has an effect after you use the ability, which means that you've basically traded a card in your hand to turn Crystal Wing off, if you can think of it that way. So for the going second player, they are losing a card from their hand, and that is the benefit of going first. But it's a much more fair interaction. Appollousa, if it has 3 or 4 negates, is a 1 card, and not their board's going to be more than Appollousa. It's going to have other cards on it. 1 card that literally just eats 4 or 5 interactions. Now, Light and Darkness Dragon Lord is much fairer because A, it's not so generic, and B, it's mandatory. So, Light and Darkness Dragon Lord is a card that's kind of fun to play against. Because it's like, how can I force this card to negate the bad cards? And like, what does that do for me? And also the fact that it's once per chain means that you can try and like be cheeky with quick play spells. So that's pretty cool. But Appollousa is just you just feel like you can't do anything against that card until she's out. And the worst part is when you use a card to try and bait Appollousa and it doesn't trigger. Like your opponent sees through your bait. And then you're just like, well, now I've just used a card that was not, that was suboptimal. So the interaction with Appollousa just puts you on such a back foot that it's not healthy. I need to speed this up. Okay, let's see. Let's see. What else can we get rid of? As far as generic cards, Dimensional Shifter, I think it's Dimension Shifter. Dimension Shifter, which is, I guess I should be pulling these up for the people who don't know what they are. Hold on. Dimension Shifter, if you have no cards in your hand, you can pitch this card to the graveyard, and until the end of the next turn, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So this is another, just like Duel and just like Maxx C, this is another, like, as soon as this card resolves, it's a floodgate effect that you are unable to escape from. Now, it does hit both players, but you're not going to put Dimension Shifter in your deck if it's going to impact you. So this card is, it creates a sensation where you can't get through the opponent's abilities, and that is just, again, it's like... especially with the card at 1, right? With the card at 1, and no one's searching it, it is literally just, I lost the game because my opponent drew the outs, basically. And I don't think that the interaction there is fair. If a card like Dimension Shift, like I think Limit 1, it should be for cards that are either um, very powerful but can't be removed from the game because they serve a purpose that's too important. Like, for example, Pot of Desires. Is Pot of Desires banned, or is Pot of Desires limit 1? Pot of Desires is limit 1. So, Pot of Desires banishes the top 10 cards from your deck face down to draw 2 cards. You can only activate once per turn. 1 per turn. So, Pot of Desires is limit 1 and not banned, even though it's generic draw, because generic draw is something that honestly should be in the game. It's definitely feels bad when your opponent opens Pot of Desires because it's limit 1. You're like, he got lucky. But him getting lucky to go +1 is not nearly the same thing as him getting lucky to turn your graveyard off for 2 turns. So limit 1 cards that are not archetypal should be reserved for, like, okay, this is an effect that should be in the game, but if it was at 3, it would be toxic. That's what a limit 1 card should be. Dimension Shifter is not that. Dimension Shifter is literally just, this effect should not be in the game, but we don't want to ban it for some reason. That's a problem. We should not have those cards. Okay, and with Maxx C, Duel, and Lockbird, and Dimension Shifter all out of the game, that takes care of all the Floodgate negates, which means that we should get rid of Call by the Grave. So Call by the Grave is a card that inspires a lot of hate from a lot of people. If you've never seen this card, it's a quick play spell card. It says target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do until the end of the next turn, its effects are negated, as well as the activated effects and effects of monsters on the field with the same original name. So Call by the Grave is a quick play spell that you usually will activate in response to an opponent activating a hand trap, because the hand trap has to go to the graveyard from the hand to activate its effect. So you could just play Call by the Grave and you negate the same hand trap effect while it's on the stack. And the reason why people do not like this interaction is because it's a quick play spell and not a monster, it can only be activated if it is your turn, unless you set it. Which means it is a card that is not good at going second, and instead is very good at going first. And a lot of people feel like that's not good. We don't want cards that make it easier to go first, because going first is already so easy. You don't have to play through a board, and hand traps are your opponent's literal only way of stopping you from building a board. So if you have like an anti-hand trap card, it just means that you essentially continue building your plays, and your opponent is just cut out from interacting with you in any way. So you should, if you are going first and your opponent has Ash, Blossom, and Joyous Springs, for example, you should have to play through the Ash. You should have to like bait the Ash. You should have to try and determine if your opponent has Ash before you play a big card. And then even if you get Ash, you should have to say, okay, I got Ash. That's normal. Ash is at 3. What do I do to try and build a board through this Ash? That should be the interaction. The interaction should not be, oh, I drew one of my Call by the Graves, so my opponent's one hand trap does not affect me. I can just keep going. That is essentially trading a card from your hand to rip a card out of your opponent's hand when they were discarding a card to try and stop a card from your field. Hand traps are already inherently weak. Like if you play Imperm on your opponent's monster, then you are stopping like a big effect, but you've lost a card from your hand, and your opponent's monster is still on the field. So, Imperm and Ash Blossom and Effect Veiler are really like just kind of bad cards. The exception is Gamma, but Gamma can only be used if you have no monsters, so it's a little bit fairer. It is possible that we should ban Gamma too, actually. Yeah. Since Gamma can't be called by the grave anyway, but that card is pretty annoying. So Frame Gear Gamma, when your opponent activates a monster effect while you control no monsters, you can special summon both this card from your hand and one Frame Driver from your hand deck or graveyard, and if you do, negate the activation. If you do that, destroy the monster. This effect is similarly to the other cards. It is literally just, if you open this card, you win the game going second. That's too much. We do want going a second to be better, but negating an effect and destroying the card just because you happen to open your one of is disgusting. So yeah, no. Anyway, so that's why I want to get rid of Call by the Grave, and then in the same way we want to get rid of Crossout Designator, because Crossout Designator is just declare one card name, banish one card of that name from your deck, and if you do, negate its effects as well as the activated effects and effects on the field of cards with the same original name until the end of the turn. Now, the real problem with banning Crossout Designator is that it means that a lot of decks do not have defense against Nibiru, the Primal Being. And Nibiru is definitely an annoying card and probably would be like a 3 of if you did this list, because you would... the reason why people don't play multiple copies of Nibiru right now is because they expect that they can draw into it with Appollousa or Maxx C. If you ban Maxx C, then people are just going to play more copies of Nibiru to make sure that they open them. Especially if Crossout Designator is banned, because then you don't have to worry about getting Crossout. But... even though Nibiru is like a card that's really annoying to play against, it is a card that has a lot of, like, tells, a lot of interaction. And without Maxx C, Nibiru is the only way to punish a board for overextending. It is a very heavy punishment, but yeah, I don't know. Nibiru is a problem, and I think one of the things that I didn't like about Coder's video is that he kind of brushed Nibiru off, even though his list was setting up for Nibiru to be a big issue. I'm acknowledging that Nibiru was going to be a big problem with this list, but it's still healthier to have it in the game than not. I think actually. I think actually with this list you put Nibiru to 1. Okay, so that's my first limit 1 card. Oh, can you guys? You guys can't see this. Hold on. That doesn't help you. Can I raise the? No. Hold on. I have been bamboozled by font. Go and much better. Okay. All right, so we're gonna have to hop back and forth then. Okay, Maxx C, Duel, Unlock, Bird, Appollousa, Dimension Shifter, Call by the Grave, Frame Gear Gamma, Crossout Designator, and then limited Nibiru, the Primal Being. There we go. Okay. Already at 23 minutes. Okay, let's speed this up. Run through a couple of quick ones that are obvious. All of the floodgates. So we got Anti-Spell Fragrance, which is both players must set spell cards before activating them. We got Skill Drain, which is negate the effects of all face-up monsters on the field while they are on the field. We got Rivalry of Warlords, which is each player can only control one type of monster. Then we have Goes and Match, which is each player can only control one attribute of monster. Then we have Summon Limit's already banned. Okay, and then we have where's the other card? There can be only one, which is each player can only control one monster of each type. Okay, so so yeah, all these Floodgate cards, there can be only one. Rivalry of Warlords, Anti-Spell Fragrance, goes attach. All right. All these cards create non-games. It's literally just my opponent opened their one of Floodgate card, and now I can't play the game. That's ridiculous. In addition to those, I think, what is the card called? I think it's called Insect Border. Or what is it called? Inspector Border. Cannot be normal summoned or special summoned if you control a monster. Neither player can activate monster effects against the number of monster effects the player has previously activated that is less than the number of monster types currently on the field. If an activation's effect was negated, it still counts till for their turn. That card is also stupid. Inspector Border. Then where are the other 7 cards? Dimensional Fissure. Dimensional Fissure, any monster sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Macrocosmos. While this card is facing on the field, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. And then Masked Hero of Darklaw. Any card sent to your opponent's graveyard is banished instead. So yeah. In the same way that Dimensional Shifter is broken, these cards are also broken. So Macrocosmos. Masked Hero Darklaw. And Dimensional Fissure. Alright, oh, Dimensional Fissure reminds me of another Floodgate, which is Dimensional Barrier. This card is stupid. Declare one monster card type, Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Exceed, or Pendulum. For the rest of the turn, either player can special summon monsters of the declared type, also negate their effects of types while they're on the field. So this card is really stupid specifically because Ritual and Fusion summons have to activate as part of an effect. So you can literally just activate Dimensional Barrier in response to the declared activation of your opponent's polymerization, and then not only have you negated all fusion monsters, and you also prevent them from fusion summoning, but now the card that they've activated has been negated as well, which is just like, if you have like a Floodgate negate for the whole board, you can't also negate the summon that's immediately happening. That's ridiculous. So yeah, this card is just unfair. All right, and then you might be thinking, well, I mean, that card's not searchable. Well, it is, and it's searchable by Triple Tactics Thrust, which definitely also needs to go along with Triple Tactics Talent. Well, let's see. All right, so let me talk about these 2 cards. So, Triple Tactics Trust, Triple Tactics Talent. Let's see. Triple Tactics Thrust. If your opponent has activated a monster effect this turn, set one normal spell or normal trap directly from your deck except Thrust, or if your opponent controls a monster, you can add it to your hand instead. That set card cannot be activated this turn. So, if you are going first and your opponent hand traps you, you can set a card like Imperm from your deck so that you can interact with your opponent during their turn. And if you are going second, this card allows you to draw normal spell cards so that you can like extend and make plays and do stupid stuff like that. And a lot of times when you are going second, you will draw into specifically Triple Tactics Talent, which is if your opponent has activated a monster effect during your main phase this turn, activate one of these effects, draw 2 cards, take control of one monster your opponent controls until the end phase, and look at your opponent's hand and choose 1 card from it to shuffle into the deck. So this card from a flavor standpoint is very interesting. It's supposed to represent Pot of Greed, Change of Heart, and the Forceful Sentry. And that's cool. Obviously, if you're going first, you typically want to Forceful Sentry, and if you're going second, you typically want to Change of Heart. The main problem with this card is that the Change of Heart effect is actually broken. So Change of Heart is typically target one monster your opponent controls, take control of it until the end phase. This card does not target. And because it does not target, it is very difficult to interact with. You can't really you can't respond to it by making one of your monsters immune to spells, or removing that monster from the field, or activating its effect so that your opponent can't activate it, anything like that. You literally, like, if you try and make one of your monsters less appealing for your opponent, they will just take a different monster. So because talent does not target, it is just impossible to play around. This card is ridiculous. And just like the other cards that I mentioned, this card literally just makes a game into a non-game. Yes, we do want going second to be decent, but going second players should be playing cards like Lightning Storm and Dark Hole. This card is, yes, it is better at going first, which makes it more likely to be run, and a lot more people do play Talent than play Change of Heart, but let's be honest, it literally is just Change of Heart. Like yes, you can use this card to draw 2 cards, and that's kind of funny, but almost always this card is just Change of Heart. So Change of Heart is that good, it's already in the game, play Change of Heart. That's it. Alright, what else do we have? So far, the list has basically been exactly like Coder's list, except for that I added Darklaw. I'm omitting some of the cards that he mentioned, though. He is correct about every barrier statue, so... if you've never seen any of these cards, so Stormwinds is banned because it actually saw play. Abyss is seeing play with Chimera, so I don't know why Abyss hasn't been banned yet. But every one of these cards is neither player can special summon monsters except monsters of this attribute: water, earth, dark, light, and fire. And for the most part, these cards are not searchable, so that's why they typically don't see a lot of play. But Stormwinds was searchable because there was a card that special summoned Winged Beast from your deck, and now Abyss is searchable because there's a card that mills Fiends, and then there's another card that special summons a Fiend monster from your graveyard during your opponent's turn. So Barrier Statue of the Abyss sees playing Chimera. At the very least, dark monsters are a lot more common, so this has not been nearly as impactful as banning all non-wind monsters. But still, like this is gross. This is just, especially if if you can't combo with it. Like if you're just playing Stun and you just literally just normal summon Barrier Statue of the Torrent pass, that's stupid. Like that's not a game. It's a non-game. So we don't want that. Speed things up. I think SP Little Knight should be banned. Let's see. And in the same way, I think IP Masquerena. IP Masquerena and SP Little Knight. These 2 cards cause a ton of problems for people. So it's a Link 2, requires 2 effect monsters. If this card is Link summoned using a Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link monster as material, you can target 1 card on the field or in either graveyard, banish it. Also, your monsters cannot attack directly this turn. When your opponent activates a card or effect, you can target 2 face-up monsters on the field, including a monster you control, and banish both until the end phase. So SP is very annoying because, first of all, you can make her during your opponent's turn with IP Masquerena, and then banish one of your opponent's cards. But then more importantly, she protects your board. So one of the main things you can do going second, especially with the changes here, is you can play board breakers. You can play cards like Raigeki or Darkhold or something. And SP Little Knight can literally respond to you trying to play a board breaker by banishing 2 cards you control. One of her SP Little Knight and another monster. And then saving them. And it's like, okay, well, maybe I broke my opponent's board, but now, after playing through the SP that banished one of my cards, now I have to win the game right now, or those monsters are coming back. So, if you are in a situation where you cannot win the game immediately, but all you can do is try and break boards, that's a game that we want to encourage. We want to encourage a game where it doesn't end on turn 2 or turn 3. A game where it's going to turn 4 or turn 5 is more interesting. So, SP Little Knights, punishing people trying to extend the game by making it so that you will just win the game on turn 3 is toxic. I don't like that. So that card should be banned. IP Masquerena is... during your opponent's main phase, you can immediately, after this effect resolves, link summon 1 link monster using materials you control, including this card. It's very similar to Unchained Soul of Rage, except that it uses monsters you control. And then a link monster using this card as material cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So this card is just, first of all, it's a lingering protection effect, which goes on any link monster. There are way too many link monsters in the game for this to be fair. And then also, it's just like a frustrating interaction. It causes all sorts of problems. There are a lot of cards that are that only see play because they give me special summon during the opponent's turn thanks to IP Masquerena, and that's ridiculous. This card is just, it's seen a lot of play. It's had its time in the meta. It needs to go. Okay. Then cards that like absolutely should be banned because they've been in the game for way too long. Sprite Elf and Predator Plant, Verte Anaconda. These two cards have been banned in both the TCG and the OCG forever. It's ridiculous that they're still here. These cards warp the meta. They cause all sorts of problems. So Sprite Elf requires 2 monsters, including a level, rank, or link 2 monster. Cannot be used as link material to turn into summon. Your opponent cannot target monsters this card points to with card effects. That's disgusting. Why is that there? During the main phase, you can target 1 level 2 monster in your graveyard, or if your opponent controls a monster, you can target a rank or link 2 monster instead, and special summon it. So this card, Sprite is good without this card. Sprite can see play without this card. This card just makes Sprite intolerable. And it means that Sprite is much better as an engine. So if you took Sprite Elf out of the game, you could literally take every other Sprite card and make it 3. And people would play Sprite occasionally, and it'd be kind of a good engine in some level 2 decks like Evil Twins. But Elf is the problem. Elf is the problem. Gigantic is fine. So this card just needs to go. And then in the same way, Verte. Any 2 monsters, you can pay 2,000 life points, send a fusion or polymerization normal or quick play spell from your deck to the graveyard. This effect becomes that spell's effect when this card is activated. Also, you can't special summon for the rest of the turn. So this card ignores restrictions. So for example, Red Eye's Fusion is balanced around you cannot normal or special summon any other monsters for the turn. Verte does not play through restrictions. It just activates the effect of the card when it is activated. So all Verte does is it activates Red Eye's Fusion to fusion summon Dragoon from your deck, and that is fine. But Dragoon is intended to be like, I play this 1 card and I get a board and then I pass, which it is a 1-card machine. It's very dangerous. Getting Dragoon with other cards is ridiculous, especially in like any deck. Like if it's like a dedicated Fusion deck, a dedicated Dark Magician deck, a dedicated Dragon deck, that's one thing. That's cool. That's interesting. But for it to be in like a Synchro deck like Centurion, or for it to be in like a Link deck, it's ridiculous. This card does not, like, Dragoon does not belong to these decks, and Dragoon is not intended to be a generic card. It's intended to be a really powerful and dangerous card, and it is being made generic solely by Verte. So Verte should go, absolutely. Next up, we have Barone. Barone, of course, is an Omni Negate. Once per turn, you can target 1 card on the field and destroy it. Once while face up on the field, when a card or effect is activated as a quick effect, you can negate the activation. If you do, destroy the card. And then once per turn during the standby phase, you can target a level 9 or lower monster in your graveyard. Return this card to the X deck, and if you do, special summon that monster. Okay, so Barone is... she's difficult to make, but she is a card that just legitimately is designed to like protect your board from hand traps, and then also serve as an Omni Negate later. So it is nice that you can only do one or the other, but it is too easy to make, and it is a card that will just frustrate your opponents to no end. Now, I will note that Barone should only get banned at the same time that the new Speedroid cards come out, because Speedroids are legitimately very, very weak without Barone. They are a deck that literally just dies to Nibiru without Barone. So if Barone is going away, Speedroids should get their new cards first. But with that in mind, take Barone out for the players that don't play it, like Kashtira and Dark Magician. They don't need it. Anything else generic that I can think of? Promethean is almost tempting. Promethean has done a lot of damage since she's come, but I feel like Promethean doesn't make the game unplayable. She's just really, really frustrating. The Bestials are questionable. Like, Bestial cards... Bestial cards are really generic. But I mean, if you didn't play Bestials, you could just play DD Crow instead. So I don't know that that's necessarily like that hitting them would necessarily change anything. It would make boards a lot less good, but I don't know that that's like what this list is for. Guardian Chimera. Guardian Chimera is seeing a lot more play than it used to, but I don't think that's a problem. Oh, Super Polymerization. Super Polymerization, absolutely, like, stop playing this card. It's ridiculous. There's no way for you to interact with it. It gets rid of 2 cards on your field for no reason. It's, again, another example of, like, a card that's too good going second. And unlike other board breakers, it's a quick play spell for some reason. So, yeah, no, we don't want that. Coder banned Thunder Dragon Colossus. I don't like that. I don't think Thunder Dragon Colossus is a problem. Instead, I say we ban Nemesis Corridor. I think that Thunder Dragon should have access to Colossus, because Colossus is one of their 2 boss monsters. But Thunder Dragon Colossus should not be a card that's very easy to get for everybody else. So yeah, getting rid of Nemesis Corridor, which is the typical way that you bridge into it, is good. Nemesis Corridor, for those of you that don't know, is it's just a Thunder monster that special summons itself from the hand. Nemesis Corridor, target one of your banished cards, shuffle, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, shuffle that card into the deck. So this card is literally just, it's a Thunder monster that activated an effect from the hand and then summon itself so that you can tribute it for Colossus. And yeah, okay, that's it. So, oh wait, hold on, that's the forbidden cards. Do I need to limit anything else? I think Phantom of Ubel probably needs to be limited. I know I said this list was mostly about generic cards, but I really come on. Phantom of Ubel is just disgusting. That card gives you way too much extension. Extending from the extra deck is weird. And I know that's weird for me to say. Like, of course, every card that's in the extra deck extends, but extending from the graveyard with the extra deck is weird. That's a weird thing. Don't do that. Are any hand traps too powerful, other than Nibiru, with these changes? No. Okay, yeah. Alright, so let's go over the list. Maxx C, Duel and Lockbird, Appollousa, Bow of the Goddess, Dimension Shifter, Call by the Grave, Cyframe Gear Gamma, Crossout Designator, There Can Be Only One, Rivalry of Warlords, Anti-Spell Fragments, Goes and Match, Inspector Border, Macrocosmos, Masked Hero Darklaw, Dimensional Fissure, Dimensional Barrier, Triple Tactics Thrust, Triple Tactics Talent, Every Barrier Statue, IP Masquerena, SP Little Knight, Sprite Elf, Verte Anaconda, Baronne de Fleur, Super Polymerization, and Nemesis Corridor, and then limit Nibiru and Phantom of Ubel. And I think that if you did this, it would change the game in a dramatic way. You would have a lot fairer games that were decided by engine as opposed to decided by non-engine. And you would have situations where you would win the game because of your Kashtira cards and your Kashtira deck, not because of your hand traps. Yeah, so let me know what you guys think in the comments below. My name is Serafi, and I was thrilled to have all of you with me.